Nairo is a former Smash Bros. Pro player who has had quite the internet presence for the past decade or so. I heard some things about him and decided to take a look into the man himself to see what I could come up with, and to put it bluntly, the dude has had quite the past indeed. Before we get into him though, we first gotta go over another former Smash player named CaptainZack, because let me tell you, the rabbit hole we're about to go through together is one full of so many twists and turns it would drive you insane. Shout out to the Patreon members, you already know what's up. If you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon link below. Now let's get to it, because we have a lot to go over. CaptainZack is a former Smash pro who got himself into a bit of a controversy with another pro named Ally. On March 22nd, 2019, another pro player named Tamim would make a series of tweets about some impending doom, with one of them pointing at Ally implying he was dating a minor. For reference, Ally was 26 and CaptainZack was 16. CaptainZack would catch wind of this tweet and delete it as he had access to Tamim's account, but Tamim would continue to post stuff on an alt account, showing a Discord message where Ally states he started caring for Zack and liked him back. Zack would deny anything having to do with Ally, but then 3 months later on June 29th, Zack would post an image with a skeptic note saying that Tamim was telling the truth the whole time before deleting the image shortly after. People quickly put the pieces together, and so on July 3rd, Ally was forced into confessing that he, at the age of 26, dated a 16-year-old, and soon forced himself into retirement after admitting this. So, no harm, no foul. A predator got caught and was rightfully exposed, right? Not exactly, because things get deeper, as a Twitter account named Smash Bros. Truth would come out with allegations that Zack had blackmailed Ally into game fixing against Smash Bros. Zack Ray and Nairo, using his relationship with Ally as leverage. Footage of Ally playing against Zack Ray was already suspicious, so hearing this claim had a lot of people interested.
We're still waiting.
The back air? No?
He's gonna land! He fell on the floor. He's in a good spot.
What is he?
Wait! It's a tense situation. It's alright! Are you living? Are you? He's gone!
Zack will end up admitting to all this in a tweet longer he released on August 2nd, first saying he never intended to expose Ally ever, and said that he indeed got Ally to drop those matches and posted their DMs of him doing so, power tripping and all that. His reasoning was because he was doing poorly in tournaments and was jealous watching Ally do good, and so used their relationship as blackmail to force him to drop those matches. After all this, his team Polar Ace will drop him from their roster, and 2G Gaming will ban him from attending all their tournaments on August 5th, just a few days later. It would also come out a year later on July 5th, 2020 that Zack did threaten Ally with releasing info that they were dating if he didn't drop the matches, with D-Disciple dropping DMs between him and Ally in which Ally references so. It's pretty easy to put everything together here. Ally is gross as hell for dating a teenager a whole ass decade younger than him, and CaptainZack is a manipulative loser using someone's attraction toward him as an opportunity to climb the social ladder. Both people here are in the wrong without a shadow of a doubt, and both deserve to have their careers come to an end, plain and simple. Now you may be thinking, where does Nairo come into play in all this? And well, that's where things start to get interesting, because it turns out Nairo and Zack had their own similar thing going on 2 years before all this happened, back when Nairo was 20 and Zack was 15. On March 18, 2017, Nairo would show discontent on Twitter when Zack took a picture with someone. On the 21st, Nairo would make 2 tweets towards Zack, both saying things of similar nature, funnily enough mentioning Ally a whole 2 years before that stuff went down, and Zack even made another tweet in which he would reply saying that Nairo was his husband. 2 days later on the 23rd, Nairo would tweet a Smash Pro tweet to get off his Zack or get the claws, which sounds like some cute little relationship flirting protection talk at first, until you remember that Nairo is 20 and Zack is 15, which then becomes extremely weird. They would actually meet up together at CEO Dreamland 2017, a Smash event that ran between April 14th to April 16th, just a few short weeks after the public Twitter flirting, in which some random person would take a picture of Zack laying in Nairo's lap in full view of the public on the venue floor, which is screaming red flags to my face. I also made sure it was at CEO Dreamland by cross-referencing the nearby chair and its unique build with the extra support from leg to leg to the chairs at the venue and they match up, so we know when this pic was taken. They even teamed up together in the 2v2 tournament and got second place together, showing that they had been practicing together for a while now if they were that good playing with each other. Despite the public flirting on Twitter, despite literally cuddling together on the venue floor, nothing was said for the time for whatever reason. The situation between Ally and Zack would happen 2 years later, and so now it was just Nairo who was the last one in the good graces of the Smash community. Seeing that Nairo had been flirting with the minor and cuddling with them was absolutely shocking to me, because this kind of behavior can only mean one thing. Perhaps other people just brushed it off or didn't care, but the fact this was happening in the first place was disgusting. Either way, let's just say these two might have been really close friends as nothing ever came from this, and so people move on with their lives. However, halfway through 2020, the situation will pop up and bring forth a bunch of information that isn't exactly shocking to hear. On July 1st, 2020, a multitude of allegations from within the Smash community will make their way around Twitter. A whole bunch of known Smash community members were exposed during this, and in doing so, rumors about Zack and Nairo apparently sleeping together started to go about. Zack would deny this, saying he made it all up to impress his friends to seem cool or whatever, and Nairo would deny it as well, saying last year in 2019 he already confronted Zack about this and dealt the issue to the proper channels. It seems this was just a red herring in the Smash community getting overzealous, so people go to sleep knowing one of their favorite players was just caught up in the rumor mill and nothing more. However, as the people were sleeping, Zack would drop a tweet longer the early morning, and in said tweet longer is the image link of Zack's retelling of his experience with Nairo during CEO Dreamland 2017 to an unknown party. The link is as graphic as it sounds, so while I can't go through a lot of what is said due to YouTube rules, Zack does tell this unknown person just a few weeks later how everything went down between them, even texting other people about how he was currently in Nairo's bed lining up with the time CEO Dreamland took place. He shows phone calls with Nairo that took place just before he made that tweet longer admitting to blackmailing Ally, and showed a $2,000 payment from Nairo on August 13th, saying that he was told by doing his part and not telling people about what they did, he'd receive financial help, basically saying this was bribe money, in this example asking for money after losing a sponsor when admitting to blackmailing Ally. He then shows screenshots of more payments from an alt account, proving it was Nairo by showing he asked for the same amount in text and got that same amount later that day. He then shows a screenshot of Nairo trying to constantly contact him on Messenger before and after they made their respective Twitter posts denying everything between them at first. After this news came out, Nairo would deactivate on Twitter and his brother would post in their Discord server that it was over and that Nairo was done. Nairo would then reactivate and post a message saying he was wrong and that what he did was wrong, apologizing to Zack for what he did, and that he would take a break from social media and all that before saying he failed everyone as he apologized more. The gaming organization NRG would drop him, tournament organization 2G Gaming would ban him from any future events under them, and on September 10th, Twitch would ban Nairo as well, effectively ending his streaming career on the site. Now, after the initial exposure of Nairo, some members of the Smash community would come out explaining what they saw themselves, the first being Tweak in the tweet longer he wrote. The most important part from it would be right when he specifically says he told Zack not to go to Nairo's room that night when things first went down, but Zack did so anyways. He also says that Nairo knew he put the pieces together and begged him not to tell anyone. Along with this would be Tweak telling Zack after he dropped his tweet longer he told him exactly that, and interestingly enough mentions he also told Zack not to do anything with Nairo, which implies by Tweak's observations of their interactions that night that this was something he worried about, meaning that Nairo was feeding into this relationship of sorts just as much as Zack was. The next testimony will be from Zero before his situation went down, in which he specifically remembers sometime in 2016 after noticing Zack and Nairo always hanging around together, that he asked Nairo if anything was up and Nairo would say that he had potential and that was that, before expressing regret for not looking into this any further and for believing Nairo at the time. Both Tweak and Zero's testimonies were used as a way to further the idea that Zack and Nairo were a thing, and so people keep their pitchforks lit as things moved on. Now before we move on, let's take a quick recap of how everything has gone thus far. Nairo has publicly flirted with Zack on multiple occasions leading up to CEO Dreamland on Twitter. They were caught cuddling together, they ended up sleeping twice together, Tweak notices weird stuff going on and worried they would do stuff together, and Zero noticed that Nairo was close to Zack as far back as 2016. Now things were looking like a pretty open and closed case, except one thing was on some people's minds. Zack is a known manipulator, as just a year prior he manipulated Ally in a very similar way, getting in a relationship with him and using it as blackmail to get him to do whatever he wanted. This had some people thinking about this whole chain of events, and so a familiar face will pop back into the mix and make things much more deeper than initially seen. On September 14th, Tamim would come back into the fray and post a tweet longer about Zack and Sam Sora, another known Smash player. There's a lot that is said in here that isn't overall important to the story, save for two parts. The first is that Tamim claims Zack told him that he went up to Nairo while he was sleeping and started to perform acts on him while he was asleep. This is a massive claim to make, but there isn't a single piece of actual evidence to back it up. You're just supposed to believe Tamim at his word and nothing more, no screenshots or nothing. The second and biggest piece of hard evidence against Zack is how in a livestream Zack cried about taking bribe money from Nairo, but when you check back on his text with Nairo, he just asked for it and Nairo obliged.
And other people are like, it's your fault for accepting the money. Like, what was I supposed to do? I was offered it. Like, I just didn't, it felt so, I felt so trapped.
At no point is there any evidence of Nairo using money to silence Zack like he'd been saying in his own tweet longer, and given the money transactions all happened after Zack got exposed for being a manipulative loser, it's impossible to believe Zack's word about it being hush money, as his word can't be trusted anymore and can easily be believed it was him being manipulative yet again. The Simonsayz section had its own damning pieces of evidence, such as him accompanying Ally and Zack to the movies while they were in a relationship, and even reflecting on how he teamed up with Ally for the win after the secret was out to the public, showing he was well aware of the relationship between the two and never spoke out about it, along with more evidence of him being fake when the news came out. Tamim applies his fakeness to the Nairo situation, showing how the day before the news came out he was so close with him still that Simonsayz was on a YouTube video with him. Tamim then theorizes why Simonsayz is even talking with Nairo to begin with, and goes on about unrelated stuff before the tweet longer ends. Despite Tamim's claim about what Zack told him that night when Nairo having literally no evidence to back anything up, people were more focused on Zack again because of the clip of him being a lying shit about the money being hush money was, well, a straight up lie. That and the Simonsayz allegations brought eyes to the situation yet again, and so Simonsayz will reply with his own tweet longer just a day later. It's a very long read full of not so very important info for this video throughout, but there are a few things that caught my eye in it. After coming back to the room from the tournament, he saw Nairo and Zack cuddling in bed together and found it extremely weird, and found out months later that they had slept together after Zack told him. Instead of being a responsible adult and contacting Zack's parents, Nairo himself, or any other authority figures in the Smash community, he waited until Nairo told him about what he did 2 years later at Prime Saga 2019. He then says at EVO 2019, they all three made up a story about how Zack lied about sleeping with Nairo to impress his friends, with him being the so-called witness to the fight in the hotel room, which is the exact story Nairo and Zack ran on July 1st, 2020 when the news came to public on Twitter, before Zack confessed later the next day. Simonsayz also says he was never complacent yet did nothing to thwart this relationship, and in fact was part of the fake story they made up, but whatever. It's also worth noting it came out that Salem, a 22-year-old adult at the time, was the one clearly excited hearing Zack's story with Nairo in those Discord DMs. Salem will drop a DM in a tweet longer in March 2021, which shows that Simonsayz panicked and went to him telling him to stop talking about his involvement with the cover-up story, indirectly showing that Simonsayz is most likely telling the truth in his tweet longer about the reason for the cover-up, and he was fully aware of the legal ramifications with his inclusion in it, adding more credence to Simonsayz's tweet longer. Now, after the public started to turn on Zack after finding out he was manipulating evidence again with the hush money situation, and Simonsayz was complacent in both Ally and Nairo's relationship with Zack, people are up in arms and waiting to see what would happen next. All four of these people are a bunch of weirdos. Zack is weird for constantly dating adults and being manipulative as shit. Ally is gross for dating a teenager. Nairo is still disgusting for publicly flirting and cuddling with a teenager. And Simonsayz is weird as hell for being complacent in both these situations, and also fake as hell for flipping his opinion once the public learned of each. Pitchforks would rise once more, but this time a familiar person would join the fray once again and send this investigation into a very strange direction. On October 28th, 2020, Nairo would make a new statement about the situation. It goes over a lot of stuff throughout. He first mentions he hired an attorney the month the news came out, and that he has a 30-page document that can prove his innocence, but he can't post it publicly because he's saving it for court. He then says that Zack's allegations are a lie, and that when the news came out, that initial response, perhaps the most important message in his entire life, was written by a friend and not him. He then clarifies he never had a thing for Zack and that he's straight, before getting into his story of what happened at CEO Dreamland 2017. Nairo says he woke up to Zack performing acts on him and he froze up for a split second before pushing him off, saying he was shaken up by the whole ordeal. He then says the next day on Sunday that Zack blackmailed him, saying that if he didn't let him perform the same acts again, he would tell everyone what happened. He then says at another convention that took place a month later that Zack tried to blackmail him again and that he had enough of being used, and that Zack apologized after feeling guilty about the outburst. He then says he gave the money to Zack because he feared he would blackmail him again after seeing what he was capable of doing to Ally, and that it wasn't hush money but rather out of fear. The rest is mainly things like how he's a good guy and his friends all dropped him, but that he's talking to a therapist and all that. Ending things off saying if Zack or any other parties keep escalating this, that his attorney will deal with it legally. Now I'm sure you guys already see a couple weird things in this story, so let me break them down for you. The fact his most important message readmits to everything after Zack confessed and is now apparently written by a completely unknown person feels like a cop-out, because he's taking back his admission of guilt to what he did, and by proxy also negates his own brother's statement where he said it was all over now that the news was out. The way his brother worded it sounded like Nairo was indeed guilty for what he did, but now that they're taking it all back, it just kinda exists now as a weird question as to what exactly he meant by that statement. I find it hard to believe this wasn't at the very least approved by Nairo, because it doesn't make sense to admit to allegations and then months later take it back and then say this whole admission was just a giant lie. Nairo saying Zack did things to him while he was asleep matches up exactly like what Tamim said, yet you have to remember, there's not a single piece of evidence to Tamim's claims and he wasn't there when it went down, so the only two people who can testify what actually happened was Zack and Nairo. It's completely different from Zack's story, but you know what, I'll give him this one, because it's impossible to believe either person because Zack is a liar and manipulator, and Nairo tried to go along with the planned cover-up story between him, Zack and Samsora at first, making him a liar and manipulator as well. I find it extremely hard to believe that Nairo let Zack back into the room after this apparent incident, but you know what, fine, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt on this one. Nairo says that when it happened the second time the next day, Zack blackmailed him into letting him perform acts once more. Now let's think about that for a moment. Nairo is telling us that Zack threatened to tell everyone that they did stuff together if he didn't let him perform acts again, and we're supposed to believe that. If Nairo's best option in that time period was to let Zack do it again, Zack must have had some major dirt far worse than what happened between the two of them that night, or Nairo thinks that people are gullible. You have to remember, they were literally flirting in Twitter and cuddling in public leading up to CEO Dreamland, and whether that's day 1 or day 2, that picture alone shows how close their friendship was during that time. I'm gonna keep it real with y'all, I don't believe this claim at all, and if Nairo thinks painting himself as an extremely irresponsible adult who can't make basic decisions is the way to go, and we're supposed to believe it 100%, it sounds to me like someone must be really stupid, thinks their audience is stupid, or has something to hide. The story at MomoCon 2017 took place a month later, and there's something about it that just doesn't make sense to me. It had never been brought up until now, and when doing so it's just from Nairo's point of view and not Zack's, so there's no way to get any real gauge for how things possibly went down. On top of that, there's no proof to this, and again, given that Nairo lied and tried to cover things all up to begin with, I find myself struggling to believe what he's saying. I understand the point of it being there, it's to show that Zack is using him as far back as right after things apparently went down between them, but there hasn't been any proof of Zack outright using him. The worst thing that Zack's done that's provable in their situation is trying to paint Nairo giving him money as bribe money, as everything else is contradictory or has no evidence to work with and is just hearsay. It's pretty obvious to see there are some glaring holes with his story, and so coming out of this statement, I couldn't help but feel disgusted seeing this guy try to get away with having relations with a 15-year-old when he was 20. Despite all this, despite being an adult who has the responsibility to never give in to a minor's advances, despite flirting with Zack on Twitter publicly, despite evidence of reciprocating that behavior by cuddling with him in public, despite the testimony from Tweak worried about their dynamic that weekend and how he worried stuff might happen between the two of them based off said dynamic, despite Samsora admitting to making a cover with Zack and Nairo and then putting it into action, and despite the holes in general unbelievability in Nairo's story, we're supposed to believe Nairo was the victim and got played by a 15-year-old the entire way through. Even if hypothetically Nairo was stupid enough to fall into all this, he reciprocated Zack's behavior on 2 provable occasions on Twitter and in person, and given he's the adult, he knows that he should have been responsible enough to stop these advances from happening. In fact, another member of the Smash community named DeBuzz would go over a similar story with Zack, but here's how he handled things.
I remember actually a situation happened to me that was awkward is during Civil War, and this is something else I don't really like talking about, is I remember Zack tried saying something flirtatious with me, right? And I just pushed him away immediately. I said no, and I stopped that immediately, and that was that. Because I knew that was not okay, and I knew this just needed to stop. And it wasn't like continued harassment or anything by him at all. He's a younger kid that was very open-minded. And I remember saying, no, this is not okay. And I have nothing against him for that at all. Because it was, as the adult, it was my responsibility. Period. If people try to say that Nairo wasn't mature enough to understand what he was doing at the age of 20, you know, 2 years of adult experience and someone who should have known by this point that flirting with a 15-year-old was gross, then by all means die on that hill, because it'll just sound fucking crazy. With all that being said, we still had one more piece of evidence to look at. The 30-page document that exonerates him from any wrongdoing on his end, proves his innocence, and shuts up every single person doubting his story. At the end of Nairo's Twitter post is a message from his lawyer, Joseph Trey Flynn, about how if any charges were to be filed, they are confident the defense they prepped up would be enough to exonerate him in the court of law, that being the so-called 30-page document. Along with this would be vouching from 3 figures in the Smash community, Cosmos, Void, and Paradin. All 3 of these people claim to have read the document and they believe Nairo's innocent, but let's see who exactly these 3 people are. Paradin is a known Nairo fangirl and is also known for shipping Nairo and Zack back in March 2017 when they were flirting together on Twitter, so it's safe to say their word is extremely biased in Nairo's favor and can't be trusted. As far as Cosmos and Void go, they have both played duos with Nairo before, with Void playing 3 times with him and Cosmos playing 9 times with him.
It's clear they're good friends with Nairo, as when people duel together, they practice and play certain characters over and over in order to plan their attack against the other team, and given the overall track record is on the positive side, with Nairo and Void getting first place in 2 of the 3 games together, and Nairo and Cosmos getting top 10 in every single game together, it's obvious they practiced a bunch with each other, and it's reasonable to assume they grew close together. After all, they were close enough for now to let them be 2 to 3 people to read his 30-page document and use their word and nothing more to try and exonerate him. I get if they're trying to back up their friend because that's what friends generally do to each other, they got each other's backs, but I don't believe their word after seeing how close they are to Nairo. And that's on top of me not believing things without actual evidence, and up to this point nobody else has seen the 30-page document except for these 3 people. On February 19th, 2021, Nairo would upload a video in which he says that he and Zack had come to a legal agreement, also known as a settlement.
As many of you know, I've been handling things legally in the last half year, and I want to announce now that we've reached a legal agreement.
This doesn't mean either party's innocent or guilty, mind you. This just means they had a meeting of the minds and agreed on certain terms to never speak about this again. Soon after this video came out, a whole bunch of influential Smash community members would start a worldwide trending hashtag unban Nairo, both aimed at Twitch to get his account unbanned, and just in general with the hashtag itself, including but not limited to Paradin, Void, Cosmos, the lead creative director at Panda Global, Alfred, who's also gone on record saying he's read the 30-page document as well, The Buzz, and a whole slew of people, including the best player in the world at the time, MK Leo. I also noticed that Tweak made a similar sounding statement but was a lot more careful with how he said it, presumably out of fear of backlash from the Smash community at the time. Eventually, a couple weeks into this, the 2G Gaming and Collision organizations would unban Nairo, one on March 12th and the other on March 15th, and funnily enough, they never stated if he was innocent on all charges or not, meaning this decision was most likely made out of pressure rather than actual judgment. He'd also get unbanned on the Smash Global Ban database on March 15th as well, and years later after the database went defunct, the owner, Cact3000, would outright admit he had never seen the 30-page document, meaning this decision was again most likely made out of public pressure.
I don't have all the documents and information regarding Nairo's case. I've never seen that document, and I wouldn't be comfortable making a decision unless I have access to that document.
So literally everyone who's trying to get Nairo unbanned, save for 4 people, haven't even read the document. This, my friends, is nepotism at its finest. There is no way I'm gonna believe any of these people on such a serious claim if there's no evidence for me to make my mind up, and I'm not gonna believe what they say just because they're popular people or well known in the community. This doesn't make any rational sense, and yet despite all this, Nairo was able to get back into the good graces of most of the Smash community as he make a follow-up video on April 2nd saying he returned to streaming, now on YouTube as he was still banned on Twitch. Since then, he's been uploading videos on his channel like nothing ever happened, and even ran Nairo's Birthday Bash Invitational, with 2 familiar faces being the mix, not to anyone's surprise. Something that's pretty interesting to see is that Nairo has had a past of restreaming events from the VGBC organization, and VGBC has made it known you need their permission to restream anything from them. They have a Google form to ask for permission, going as far to ask which event and your own watch time along with how many views, and Gimmer, one of the owners of VGBC, has gone on record saying that until Smash events affect the United States on a political level, he will never let people restream events without permission. It gets funny when you find out that Nairo has restreamed 5 VGBC events all back to back with each other, and 5 others as well, making it a total of 10 VGBC events that he has restreamed from them. It gets even funnier that Double Down was the last time Nairo restreamed for VGBC, as the last day of the event was on July 10th, only because YouTuber Technicals ended up in a conversation with Gimmer and the other owner of VGBC, his brother Apostle, in person as he was being escorted out for sneaking in after being banned, asking them if they gave Nairo permission to restream, in which they would say this, not even giving him a straight answer.
Yeah, but you guys give him consent to restream your stuff, right?
You're saying we did.
Do you
that.
or do you
just
not?
Said we did that.
Do you or do you not?
Did you not just say we did that?
I'm not.
2 sentences ago.
I'm not accusing you, but are you giving him consent to restream your stuff?
This is my problem.
Are you giving him consent to restream your stuff?
We don't.
You don't talk to him at all? That's not like an arrangement?
We're not part of it. Me and Matt, we run our tournaments. Do the best we can.
They then say in a Twitter post after Technicals released a video on this situation that Nairo never had permission to restream ever, meaning that they either let Nairo do this behind their backs multiple times and are bad at their jobs, or they're just lying to the Smash community. If they want to go down the route of being incompetent dumbasses, by all means go for it, it doesn't make them look any better. I low-key hope they're just straight up lying because at least it means they aren't as stupid as they seem, but it's whatever at this point. As we wrap this video up after going through this entire mess, it became clear there was more going on here than just Nairo himself. Despite the clear lack of Nairo being a responsible adult, which led to this entire ordeal to begin with, instead of the Smash community keeping him ousted like he rightfully deserved to be, they instead advocated for his unbanning on Twitch and by proxy within the community itself, which worked community-wise as 2 organizations unbanned him and people generally think of him in a good light now. Oh, but don't forget, the reason they advocated to begin with was based on 4 people's word and nothing more about reading a 30-page document that supposedly exonerated him of any wrongdoing. Even if this document exists, the fact that only 4 people have ever seen it and people in the community are supposed to use their word as evidence of Nairo being innocent is actually mind-blowing. If hearsay is considered evidence in this community, then I have nothing else to say, because that shows just how immature and how easy it is to manipulate people on this side of the internet. I don't ever expect this document to come out because it clearly worked in fooling influential members into letting this guy back without even having to show it, so why should they now? Anybody downing him is just gonna get labeled as a troll or ignored until the community itself starts to demand to see it, in which they keep ignoring or cave in when the pressure is too hot. If the Smash community wants Nairo to roam free within their ranks, fine, they already made that decision. But you know what? I ain't gonna not talk about this situation, especially when the story itself doesn't even have a proper conclusion. Despite the Smash community telling people everything is over and to not look into this situation anymore, it's not over, because we still have a 30-page document to see, and I, along with many other people, want the truth as to what exactly proves Nairo's innocence. A common rebuttal to asking for the document is that since Nairo has already come to a legal agreement, why should he show the public what's in the document at all? Now let me ask you, if you were in Nairo's shoes and had a document that 100% exonerates you of any wrongdoing, why wouldn't you show the public now, especially now that you won't ever have to go to court, hence the legal agreement? It would prove to the community that you're 100% innocent, and better yet, prove every single doubt of wrong and make them eat their words. I don't care if it does come out and I'm proven 100% wrong, because the Smash community deserves to see the 30-page document and make up their minds themselves, not have people tell them what to believe based strictly on hearsay and nothing more.